in sales, there's no magic bullet. There's not one way. There's not one size that fits all. And you see success from multiple different types of individuals. Enable your team, remove roadblocks, and be okay with not knowing.
Welcome to Driving Growth, the go-to-market podcast for traditional B2B businesses that are looking to build systems to create predictable revenue growth. In short, turning their company into a revenue factory. I'm your host, Steve Waddington, and president of Roadmap, an agency that builds go-to-market systems. On today's show, Robbie Butchart. Robbie is a sales and business growth strategist with over 20 years experience. He is currently the Chief Revenue Officer and Partner at Launchcode and VP of Sales for Patronscout. He's built and executed go-to-market strategies that have fueled 20 to 30% year-over-year revenue growth and customer growth. I am super excited to have him on the show. I want to hear first, can you share a bit of your career journey, like the milestones along the way that have turned you into this revenue leader?
Sure. Thanks, Steve. I'm excited to be here, man. This is cool. I'm excited that you're doing this. This is, I think, a lot of value you're going to generate for those that are going to be tuning in. So, but to give a little bit of background, so I started, I've sold everything that nobody sees value in, price-driven, commoditized, which makes it really challenging. Selling telco, selling print, selling software, selling people, all on the normal side, like nothing weird, services-based, right? Mm-hmm. And hardware components in there as well, so I've really sold the mixed bag of it all, and getting into, over 24 years now of being in, as I said, like a true sales professional, got into the leadership space as I started out Launchcode with my business partners about 7 years ago. I love being in sales as a collective. I love being in leadership as well. There's just so much connection to people, and that's what really motivates me on the daily, is the ability to connect with everybody and learn their stories and befriend everybody. Doesn't always work out that way, but you always try, so Reader's Digest version.
Yeah. Now, did you always love sales, or was there and driving revenue for organizations, or was there some sort of critical moment that you said, hey, I want to become a revenue leader. That's what I want to do.
Yeah. So when I started, I actually got told my very first, I remember I worked for TELUS way back in the day, and I got told that I wouldn't be very good in sales. The interesting thing is, I think the perception associated to sales is what I didn't like. And once I changed that perspective and truly understood that you're just helping people, you're providing a service, you're not selling anything. Like, you think of sales, it's the used cars and the photocopiers and all that stuff, of which I've sold one of those. And it really is something that you're not selling. You're just there to build relationships, help people when they've got challenges. And as soon as I changed that mindset around what truly sales is, and there's a negative, connotation and perception still to this day associated to it, but it's the one area that connects and unites every single business. And without it, we don't have a ecosystem at all. It's the one standard similarity, commonality that every business has, is they all need to sell. So I think once I did that, and I had that change of mindset, Steve, way back in the day, it really repositioned my frame of mind on it, and I've loved it ever since.
Well, so with that, we talked previously about you having, building flywheels, right?
Yeah.
So where does that happen? How do you get to the point where you're building that flywheel and you become like a predictable revenue factory? And then is there struggles and missteps along the way? Because you've been with multiple companies and stuff like that, what do you think separates the ones that have that in place, that are humming, and the ones that aren't?
So I think that the commonalities around it come down to a couple of things, metrics being one, and having insight into what your business is doing. It's amazing, and I know we've talked about this, how many organizations don't measure what they're doing. Yeah. And I don't know how you improve, whatever metric you're talking about, whether it's growth, whether it's an improvement in some of the metrics from a conversion standpoint, if it's a pipeline perspective, whatever the case may be. If you don't measure it, how do you improve upon it? How do you scale it? How do you model it moving forward? So I think that's key in all of that, and really having the definition of what you're solving for, alignment through that group of revenue responsibility folks. So if it's your marketing team, your client success team, your sales team, and I even argue it goes into your ops team, right? Because if you don't have alignment there and you have that clarity, your flywheel doesn't spin, right? And the reality of it is within the larger flywheel, you have micro flywheels that are essentially, tracking as well. So that's a very interesting, it's a very interesting conversation to have as a collective organization. But without metrics and without alignment, I think everything just falls apart. And there's more to it as you get deeper into it. But those two are the catalysts to ensure you're moving it forward.
Yeah, so you don't have a scorecard to see how you're doing and actually tracking the stuff that is going to move the needle. And then I really like how you talked about how you said everybody that has revenue responsibility. Then you listed off essentially everybody in the company.
That's true.
And I do feel like that with you. Everybody in the company has revenue responsibility. So you then said you have to get them aligned. So, which leads me to believe that you've done this several times. How do you break down those silos between those different groups that tend to not feel like they have revenue responsibility?
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting conversation because it depends, I think, on the size of the organization. The small organizations, let's call it your sub 10, sub 20 folks, everybody should be responsible for revenue. Everybody, especially early stages. Like, you have conversations with, a group of founders and, they've got one person that's responsible for revenue. You got 3 or 4 of you. Why are you not all driving revenue? So when you have the smaller ones, I think there's that, it's a mandate. It is what it is. They all have to be responsible. And when you get into the larger organizations, I think having alignment through that process is key. Again, it all comes down to communication. Everything is solved with clear communication. When you remove assumption and ego in these situations and you just be like, okay, ops, client success falls under you, maybe in this instance, how much upselling are we doing? How much renewals are we engaging in to help support, because your line of sight or your BA or you're connected in from a delivery standpoint and you're hearing something, how are you connecting that in? And attribution's interesting. I don't really think it matters at the end of the day. The wins will matter, Are we all winning? Are we all bringing opportunities to the table? So back into that, breaking those silos down, I think it really comes down to having either one individual responsible for revenue, and that person has a team around them, whether it's a marketing group or a client success group or a direct sales group, and sales to inbound, outbound partners, channels. Like, there's different ways of doing that sales motion. But having all of that cycle into one individual that thinks that way, not just like a sales mind or a sales is only what we're doing. You have to have that person that brings in, the overarching strategy into the business. And that's where I see a lot of wins as we've moved through this process, is having that one individual. But it's a challenging conversation if you don't have the right mindset and the team around you.
Yeah. And that's great. I love that you're thinking that way, because a lot of folks don't think about the whole organization that way. When you think about that, and you've got that framework and how you're thinking, let's put this, that you've got a new division or a new product or something like that, and you want to launch it. But ultimately, I think go-to-market isn't a strategy, it's a system. But at any rate, how would you define, or how would you think about, we want an effective go-to-market strategy in place for an organization?
It's really interesting when you ask the question, have you talked to your client? Have you talked to the end user? Right? First, before you even talk about go-to-market. And it's really fascinating how many people are like, well, no, but I think that they're good. I think. And as soon as you hear think, stop thinking and go talk, right? Because then you validate. And if you have validation, then you can get into go to market, because you have a real need that you're solving for, right? But until then, you're assuming. And we all know what the statement of assumption is, right? So with that, after you've done that, you've had the conversation, you're like, yep, okay, this is definitely something we can solve for. Great, cool. Okay, so who are you targeting? Like, who's that ICP, right? Like, or if it's a partner, even if you're thinking a partner channel, who's the ideal partner that you want to go target? Right. So you identify those based off of either existing clients or one or two, partners or clients that you've got, build a persona around that. And now you're targeting, right? So having an intentionality around that as you go down that path, having that really clear and concise messaging on the value that you're providing. And it's got to be associated to the outcome that you solve for, not your product, not your service, because quite frankly, they don't care. There's so much noise out there right now. So how do you differentiate yourself? And it's all about what you're doing for them. Right. And that's the key through the conversations. And then you're going to get into things from that point in time where you get into building out, sales playbooks and marketing playbooks and, the content required around it, the case studies that are associated to the outcomes that you solve for. Like there's so many different components that start tying into this as you work down that path. But those you got to start small, right? Start simple, and then phone calls, emails, LinkedIn, text messages, like carrier pigeons. Like it's you gotta cut through again the noise, and it takes 8 to 12 attempts just for somebody to pick up the phone or respond, never mind agree to have a conversation about an opportunity. Right. It's just like, okay, you're knowing me, what do you want? I'll give you the time of day. And so I think as you kind of work that strategy, it's really an interesting topic.
8 to 12, you're better than me and my teams. We're like more like 12 to 20. So
is that what you're seeing now? Yeah. I love it. Well, maybe let's have a chat on the side, man. Maybe I can help you out.
but I want to stop you because I love what you're saying. So first things first, like the first duty of an organization is to understand their customer. You're absolutely right. Like that is the foundation that you need to do to be able to inform what you're going to do in your go-to-market tactics and motions and all that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah. And then it also comes down into like how are you going to track it? So like what types of tools are you using? How are you cutting again through the noise? What types of AI enablement tools are you going to implement so you can work smarter, not harder, kind of thing? Right. That sort of stuff is the evolution as it kind of moves down the path. But yeah, you got to start the basics for sure.
And that's how you scale, which is what I wanted to follow up with. So how do you get this thing to go from just, a small team to be able to amplify?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think a lot of people early mid stages struggle with it. You have that early stage, and I'm speaking just from my experience where you started it. It's your baby. You've got value that you can deliver. You've got passion. You got determination, grit. Like it's yours, and you're going in, and you're not even selling them. You're just communicating how much you can do for them and the excitement. And I am going to get this done for you.
Right.
And they feel that. They feel the energy that you bring to the table. You can't bottle that into a team, so you have to systemize it, right? Maybe you'll get some people that do, take on that passion behind it, but it's not common. So how do you enable that team to come in and do that? And that's, again, I go back to, I love the good to great Jim Collins Flywheel concept. I use it all the time. It was beat into us at Launchcode in a great way, where it brought alignment into the entirety of the business. And through that, it's basically your sales playbook, marketing playbook, brand playbook. How are you showing up? And that there's playbooks for obviously the entire organization and the divisions, but specifically into this area is you need to bring people in, that want to win, people that have proven track records of being able to deliver in it's high pressure. Sales is a high pressure, high paced, high intensity environment. You need people that can deliver in that environment, but you have to do them a favor by setting them up for success. So the playbooks that are required with the sales funnel, the approach, the questions, the guidelines, the way you present, when you follow up, where do we go, what's networks, what's events, like there's so much to that. And I rattled off a ton there, but if you have all that documented, and you're doing it anyways, if you have all that documented, you've now got a baseline, and now that becomes a living document as the team comes in. All of that comes together, and now you have like micro playbooks within your sales specific playbook, and then there's a revenue playbook associated with marketing and branding too. So long answer, but it's really about documentation and systemization.
Yeah, 100%. What are some of the kind of mistakes that you've seen, or some of the gaps that pop up? For instance, I've noticed in some of the sales mapping I've been doing for some clients that they're resourcing inappropriately. Like they'll have a senior person that's doing some entry level work, and they don't know when to actually sort of resource different segments of the sales process. So you've done this as much or more than I have. So tell me about how you actually map and align your various different sales resources to your sales process.
Yeah, and it sounds easy to talk around, but it really comes down to, again, size of business and how much like resources do you have to allocate, because there's an optimal state And then there's we need to do what we can with what we've got state, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
different situations and concepts for different folks. But when we've gone through the process, I think there's a misnomer that's we all know the misnomer. Sales is easy. Anybody can do it. All you're doing is going and having drinks and golf and hockey
Yeah.
games and all the things. Far from, right? And when we think of the requirements for like a full cycle salesperson, where they do their own sourcing for leads.
Yeah.
They go and do their discovery calls. They go and they work them through the cycle, the funnel. They get them into the close, and then they get into post production or post delivery or whatever we want to call that client success, client retention component at the end. That's a very rare person to find that can do it all.
Yeah.
And they do exist, but they're not common because people like it's different personality traits and characteristics. There's different way. Like some people love to get on the phone and they love calling people. I don't personally get it. That's definitely not me. Not my ideal day. But you do what's necessary. And in those things, I think what you see is an expectation that this person, just because I did it, they can do it.
Right.
And, I think it comes down to understanding who that individual is, doing a proper due diligence kind of up front on what motivates them, what's their passion, why do they want to do this, and then specifically understand where they think they're going to fit and align with what you need. And I've learned the hard way a couple of times, not doing that up front. They're excited and they're amped and we're going to go get this. We're going to kill it. And it's like, okay, that didn't happen. Like, why not? And through that, having clarity on not only the fact that salespeople need to have specific areas that they focus in. So I'm going to pump you a bunch of leads. I need you to go close those, right? So I've got the BDR, SDR warming things up for you. We're going to bring in the AE or the closer in that, and you're going to come in and do it. And if you need, executive support, we're going to bring that in for you. So having the metrics around, or pardon me, the roles around to support what the individual requirements are for that sales process that you need to define, super key. That whole it has to be broken out.
What are some of the building blocks? You say, here's the fundamentals that I would say, get this, and then you'll have the tools for a modern sales process.
Yeah. So basically, like, there's a CRM called Pipedrive. It's like $20 a month.
Yeah.
It's super cheap, basic stuff. Like you don't run on Excel. Like don't start that way. You might do that for the first little bit, but then get it all into that system right away, because now you're enabled, right? It does automatic reminders. It gives you tasks that you need to complete. Like it's an assistant essentially for you.
Yeah.
That's the baseline. Really, outside of that, you don't need anything else to start. You really don't, right? You got a pen, you got a paper. Like you can go old school and still get it done. Don't overcomplicate it. That's how I've always thought through this. The more overcomplication analysis that goes into it, the longer and drawn out it takes to actually get closes.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like for folks to take some of those modern tools, but they still have to do the basics. Like you have to do, the prep, the research on the person that you're doing the meeting with, get to understand them. And so like you can personalize what it is that you're doing. And then of course you have your meetings or your pitch or whatever it might be. And then you want to be able to do a recap and have this, that sort of stuff. But thinking about what's going on, all this change, things are going a lot faster. We're talking about having AI agents doing like the first part of the sales process, and touchless sales processes, stuff like that is now conversations happening. How would you future proof, or what would you think about future proofing your revenue operations moving down if you were going to give advice to folks?
Lean into it. Like AI is not new. Right. It is not a new state in which we are just this catalyst of brand new technology. The ChatGPTs of the world. Yeah, that's some cool stuff. But generative AI has been around for decades. Right. So lean into it, leverage the technology to set yourself apart from your competition and hire the people that know how to do it. Right. When we think of what it can do for your business, agentic AI that's coming, game changer. Another one. Right. And we're only, a little while after ChatGPT coming out here. We have like agentic AI, which is going to be amazing. It is going to be something that really allows for you to focus on the areas that drive the most value and revenue into the business, if you're talking about sales specifically. So if you're not leveraging it, you're going to fall behind.
Yeah. Yeah. So actually just segues perfectly into one of my last questions here is, when you think about what's needed to become a great revenue leader, what are the traits of an individual? You're talking about somebody that's obviously continuously learning. But Is there other pieces that you would say, like beyond that, a continuous learning mindset to make a great revenue leader?
I think humility,
Okay.
because when you think of these situations, you don't know everything. You know your experience, but in sales, there's no magic bullet. There's not one way. There's not one size that fits all. And you see success from multiple different types of individuals, whether they're, think of the DISC assessments. You've got people from different, walks of life that do very well in sales, introverted versus extroverted. So getting into that leadership space, enable your team, remove roadblocks, and be okay with not knowing, but having that humility to be able to come into the conversation, like, I'm not too sure. Let's figure this out together and find a way. I think that's the tying into the third thing there is find a way, be resilient, working through the stuff that comes at you, because sometimes it really sucks. But having resiliency through it, and that's maybe the entrepreneur side of me kind of coming out a little bit there, going through some of those tough times, and find a way. There's always a way. You just got to kind of forge that path for yourself. But I would definitely say that the humility component of it enables a great leadership kind of mind.
What career advice would you give to yourself starting out? Like, what would be the thing?
So many people are afraid to go out and talk to somebody. They're afraid to reach out. They're afraid to say, "Hey, Steve, nice beard, man. You got you're rocking the George Clooney style. You're just starting a conversation with somebody. Don't be afraid to start a conversation. And it's amazing what happens. It's amazing what comes out of it. It's amazing opportunities that come by just saying, "Hey, how's it going?"
People still buy from people, right? That seems to be forgotten about with all the technology that's floating throughout our lives.
Great point.
So if people want to follow you and hear more and learn more from you,
Yeah.
what's the best place to connect with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn's great. I'm there, fairly often. So that's the quickest and easiest way and the most accessible. So please find me on there.
Robbie gave us a ton of insights around how you can enable your go-to-market. At the end, he spoke about just not being afraid to get out there. Just start. It doesn't take much. Get a few basic pieces of tech to support your go-to-market and have the confidence to start conversations. If you like what you have heard, go to weareroadmap.com/podcast to download the Revenue Factory Toolkit, in which you will receive mathematical models and a framework for building your go-to-market system. Also, subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, with new episodes dropping the first and third Wednesday of every month. I'm Steve Waddington. Thanks for listening.